Republicans need to stop running and literally start working on affordable health care.
Right now, we have this moment over the next few weeks where we can find some bipartisan agreement.
This is Today as It Happened. Good Tuesday evening to you. I'm Holly Furfer here with your chronological look at the biggest events and stories of the day. From the Senate debate over a Democratic proposal to extend health care subsidies to a Supreme Court case that could remove limits on how much money political parties can spend on campaigns. So let's dive right in.
On Tuesday, President Trump talking about one of the biggest issues facing the country, the economy, traveling to Pennsylvania to discuss his economic vision going forward. President Trump has traveled the world since returning to office, from Israel to Japan to the United Kingdom to South Korea. But there has not been as much travel around the United States, with only a handful of trips to states where the president does not own properties. That changes Tuesday when President Trump is set to talk affordability in the all-important political state of Pennsylvania.
We just want to keep doing exactly what we're doing because nothing like this has ever happened.
President Trump on Monday confident that his economic policies are working, but polls show many Americans concerned about the economy. A recent poll by Gallup reported 68% of the country believing that the state of the economy is getting worse. 40% described economic conditions as, quote, poor. President Trump's push to revive confidence in the economy includes a new economic recovery package to farmers. Announced on Monday, the president said that $12 billion in tariff revenues will go to help farmers offset low crop prices, as well as farmers still recovering from China's boycott of soybeans from earlier this year. Secretary of Agriculture Brooke Rollins.
We really are trying to be so judicious, obviously with the taxpayer funds, want to make sure that these farmers can survive.
Meanwhile, on Capitol Hill this week, health care affordability is expected to be in the spotlight with a vote on a Democratic proposal to extend existing Affordable Care Act subsidies expiring at the end of the month. A Republican counterproposal has begun to circulate on Capitol Hill as well. And on the issue of housing affordability, one storyline to watch this week, the Federal Reserve is meeting, and on Wednesday, they are expected to once again cut interest rates. Joe St. George, Scripps News Group, Washington.
Now, let's take a look at some of our other top headlines of the day. Waymo is tapping the brakes and issuing a voluntary software recall. This comes after multiple reports of the robo-taxis passing parked school buses in Texas. These close calls have raised safety concerns about the vehicles, and it comes about a week after a Waymo vehicle ran over a dog in San Francisco and 2 weeks after it hit and killed a bodega cat, also in San Francisco. A winter storm warning has been issued for 14 inches of snow in multiple states. Those states include northern states like Michigan and Illinois, and also some southern states like Kentucky and North Carolina. Officials warn drivers to plan on slippery road conditions, especially when the roads are iced over in the morning and at night. Wegmans is recalling some of its products sold in 9 states. It includes the deluxe mixed nuts unsalted products in 34-ounce containers with a best-by date of July 28, 2026. The affected products were sold between November 3rd and December 1st. No illnesses have been reported, but customers should return any impacted items to the store for a full refund. All right, here it is, the Powerball jackpot up to $930 million after no one won Monday night's drawing. And as it stands now, it would be the 7th largest jackpot in history. The odds of winning are 1 in 292 million. But if you win and choose to cash in the cash-in option, you take home a cool $429 million. I think we could all use that. No one has hit the jackpot since September, so it's time. Somebody is going to do it. I believe they pull tonight.
The clock is ticking until those Obamacare tax credits expire. We're just 3 weeks away from that now. And unless Congress acts, insurance premiums could rise about 26% for millions of Americans, which could lead to higher costs for everybody. We want to go to Scripps News national congressional correspondent Nathaniel Reed, who's live with us on Capitol Hill. Nate, a Democratic health care vote planned for this week. We know this was part of that deal to reopen the government, but there was no deal or agreement on Republicans voting for it. So where are we at as far as a competing Republican plan here?
Absolutely not. And look, Republicans haven't really put forward a uniform plan at this point that they're planning to take a vote on either this week or next. And to be clear, yes, those Obamacare subsidies expire in the next 3 weeks, but Congress is only here for less than 2 weeks. And once they leave for the holiday recess, it's really hard to see how they're going to be able to get something done before open enrollment ends in early 2026. And again, there is just so much discord up here on Capitol Hill among Republicans about what that best path forward is to address the rising cost of health care. There is not a whole lot of agreement about that best path forward. A lot of Republicans saying they want to accomplish something on a bipartisan basis, but the reality is it does not seem like those bipartisan negotiations, at least here on the Senate side of the Capitol, have really been fruitful or actually happening. Take a listen. Do you think you can get something that truly works across the aisle? I mean, you've struggled to come up with something for the last decade or so.
Well, I think there are enough Democrats saying that people who make $300,000 a year probably should get a subsidy. I think there's some Democrats who would say a $5 minimum premium payment would ferret out fraud. And I think some Democrats would like the idea of having a health savings account to pay for out-of-pocket costs and have higher deductible options to lower cost.
How critical is it to address this before 2026?
I think it's really important to address it in essence now. So between now and say January, in this time frame, I think it's really important.
Rita, you and I both know that talk is a lot easier than action, and the reality is that Republicans can say they want to address the issue of health care all they want, but at the same time actually reach an agreement, reaching something that can get enough support among senators. That's 60 votes needed to pass, and plus the support of the House of Representatives, Speaker Mike Johnson, and of course, President Donald Trump on the other side of Pennsylvania Avenue, getting something that can actually pass for the American people. That is going to be a challenge, and it has been a challenge, again, for Republicans since President Trump's first term. He spoke about wanting to repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act, President Obama's signature legislative achievement. Now on the issue of ACA subsidies, the back-and-forth debate up here on Capitol Hill sounding a whole lot like that debate to reopen the government earlier this year. I want you to listen to what Senator Richard Blumenthal, a Democrat from Connecticut, said about reaching some sort of bipartisan common ground in the couple weeks they've got left before the end of the legislative year. The Republicans we've spoken with seem inclined to want to do something, though, on health care, something that could reach across the aisle. Is that possible?
There is an easy, quick, accessible path for them to do something about health care, which they desperately want to do, which is join us and extend the health care subsidies for a limited period of time. The fiscal impact is negligible. The human impact is huge. And Republicans need to stop running and literally start working on affordable health care.
And look, Maurice, the fact of the matter is Democrats can say, look, we have a plan. Republicans don't all they want until Republicans put forward an alternate plan to try and lower health care costs for the American people. We understand that Republicans are going to be meeting right as we speak in the Capitol to try and talk about what their best path forward is. We know that the Senate is going to take a vote on this Democrat plan to extend Affordable Care Act subsidies for 3 years without many other changes on Thursday. The big question right now, though, Maritza, is there going to be a competing Republican plan, an option for Republicans to vote for? And furthermore, what can that option be, and could it possibly attract some bipartisan support? At this point, all of those questions remain unknown.
And certainly all of those questions coming as we're just a few weeks away now from 2026, a big midterm election year. So I know the pressure is on everyone up there on the Hill. Scripps News congressional correspondent Nathaniel Reed live on the Hill for us.
Thanks,
we will check back in shortly. Thank you.
Coming up on Today as It Happened, the Supreme Court heard oral arguments Tuesday in a case challenging a law that limits how much political parties can spend in coordination with candidates. And Scripps News Washington correspondent Stephanie Liebergen was in that courtroom. So stay with us for her reporting, which is straight ahead. Welcome back to Today As It Happened. Let's check back in on our daily briefing of today's top stories.
The Trump administration is being sued once again after those controversial boat strikes on alleged drug boats in the Caribbean. A coalition of advocacy groups, including the ACLU, filed a lawsuit today against the Trump administration. They're calling for the release of the memo that provides the legal justification for those military strikes. They argue that the deadly strikes are illegal and that Americans deserve to see the justification for them. So far, at least 87 people have been killed in these operations since early September. The Supreme Court deciding on a major case involving Vice President J.D. Vance and money in politics. As it stands now, there's a limit on just how much donors can give to individual political parties, but Vance wants that law scrapped. Scripps News Washington correspondent Stephanie Liebergen is live with us now outside of the Supreme Court. Stephanie, you were inside the courtroom. Walk us through what happened this morning.
Hey, Maritza, good afternoon. Well, there are a lot of different types of limits when it comes to campaign and political donations, depending on who is donating and who exactly is getting the money. But today's case focuses specifically on political party donations, so donations from an individual to a political party that then could be used on behalf of a specific candidate and the type of coordination that allows. So this case put Democrats and Republicans on opposite sides of the issue, with Republicans arguing for these political party contribution limits to be eliminated, Democrats wanting to uphold them. And so the point of any political contribution limit, as it has come before the court, the Supreme Court has said that it's about avoiding corruption or avoiding the appearance of corruption. Republicans say that this political party contribution limit, it doesn't do anything about that, and so that's why it should be thrown out. They say that people don't donate to a political party as a way to, end run around bribery and trying to get a specific candidate elected. So they say if somebody wants to donate an unlimited amount of money in support of a political candidate, that they'll just go to a super PAC, which does allow unlimited donations. So that's the argument we were hearing from Republicans in court today. But they also say that other laws exist to prevent any type of bribery in a political donation. But Democrats arguing the opposite side today, arguing to keep these laws in place. And there were at least some big concerns raised by a couple of the liberal justices on the court, Justice Kagan and Justice Sotomayor. Both of them expressed concerns about removing that limit. They said that if this limit is gone, then an individual could donate a massive amount of money or an unlimited amount of money to a political party, knowing that that political party is then going to use their money to support a specific candidate. They said allowing that to happen is basically an end run around individual campaign donation limits. Take a listen to how Justice Kagan put it in court this morning.
The super PAC can't be coordinated, and these party expenditures can be coordinated, so they're more helpful to the candidate because, for the reason that the Chief Justice said, they effectively function as contributions to the candidate. There can be, coordination to the max, so that everything that the candidate would want is done through these coordinated contributions. And that's more valuable to a candidate than giving money to a super PAC that is generally on the same page, but may do things that the campaign actually doesn't want done.
The liberal justices, as well as the Democratic the attorneys representing the Democratic National Committee and those supporting this campaign contribution, also expressed that if this limit were to be eliminated, that it just sets up a situation where any other remaining political campaign contribution limits would be challenged in later lawsuits, and then those would fail as well. We even did get a question from the Chief Justice in court today, where he asked, noted that he doesn't really see much of a difference between donating to a political party and donating to an individual candidate. But in response, the Republican attorney noted that no one's really concerned about a political party using that donation in order to bribe a candidate, that that's not what they're concerned about, kind of bringing it all back to corruption and avoiding corruption and bribery in political campaign donations, that's really what any kind of limit needs to be about, Maritza.
Okay, so Steph, so let's break this down for how this is going to affect the rest of us. How influential could this case be? I mean, I know we think about Citizens United and how much money has entered our campaign finance system since Citizens United in 2010. What could this case bring? What type of impact could the decision have on our political system?
So if the justices were to eliminate this political contribution limit, legal experts say that it could be the most consequential campaign finance case since that Citizens United case in 2010 that said political spending is a form of free speech. However, there are also a few ways that the justices could come down in this case to really avoid ruling on the campaign finance issue at all. Part of what was argued before the justices today is whether the Republican committees that filed this case and the two political candidates, of course, one of them now Vice President J.D. Vance, whether they have standing to really bring this case, whether they are basically legally qualified to bring this challenge for this political contribution limit. So the court, if the justices decide that these Republican committees, they don't have standing to bring the lawsuit, or if they decide that Vice President Vance, another thing argued in court today, was that this case should be considered moot, should it, not need to continue and not need to continue to move forward because none of the people, as a named plaintiff in the case, are actively running again. And they talked specifically about the vice president, that he doesn't have any active campaigns right now, that he's not currently an active candidate for any of this, any position in 2028. That was part of what came up today. The Republican attorneys defending that, saying that the vice president has an active Senate campaign committee and that it took in $50,000 in fundraising and donations. But the Democrats countering that, saying that if the vice president was really planning to run for the Senate again, he would be taking in much more than $50,000 in donations, going to what you alluded to earlier, Maritza, that it takes a lot of money to run any kind of political campaign, Senate campaigns, of course. Then if the vice president were to run for president, that's a completely different scenario there, Maritza. But there are certainly ways that the Supreme Court could rule on this particular case and sidestep the issue entirely of campaign finance reform and potentially eliminating that limit that Republicans are pushing for. If that happens, then everything stays the same and there aren't any major changes to our campaign finance laws. So that is an option, at least, that the justices will have on the table. But of course, we will be waiting likely a few months at the very least before we know how the justices will come down on this one.
Straight ahead on Today as It Happened. Have you been paying attention to tax changes? New rules could affect your tax return. I'm Holly Furfer with the tax provisions that could impact you and year-end moves to help you save. If you haven't thought about your taxes since last filing season, now's the time to get caught up. New provisions could affect your tax return. And there are year-end moves you can still make to increase your deductions. Monica Heisenrader runs a family-owned diner.
We're excited about what the future will hold.
While the words excited and taxes are rarely used in the same sentence, Heisenrader is excited for the new tax deduction for tipped workers.
From my point of view, I'm very excited for my employees. They work very, very hard for what they do.
The no tax on tips, effective through 2028, is one of the many new provisions in effect for tax year 2025.
Up to $25,000 of your tip income can be tax exempt, meaning you won't have to pay income taxes on that money.
Carla Dennis is the CEO and founder of KDA Inc. She says one caveat about the new rule, the IRS is looking at 2025 as a transition year.
This is not a year where they're giving real hard guidance on how it's supposed to be reported on W-2s.
A similar change applies to overtime pay.
That overtime portion is not going to get hit with income taxes.
Tax professionals say keep records of tips and overtime so you don't miss out on deductions. Another change is a new $6,000 deduction for seniors, which could cause some confusion.
There was already a senior additional deduction to the standard deduction. This is not that. This is a new deduction if you otherwise qualify for, so don't overlook it.
Other notable changes: no tax on car loan interest for qualified vehicles, expiring clean vehicle credits, and expiring home energy credits. The IRS is also phasing out paper refund checks. Anyone getting a refund will do so electronically.
That's a smarter, faster, safer way to get your tax money direct deposited into your bank account.
Stieber urges all taxpayers to squeeze in some tax planning by the end of the year, especially if big changes apply to you.
There's so many changes that we should see how it goes, but it looks very promising for people that work in the industry.
To boost your deductions come filing season, consider retirement contributions to a 401k or traditional IRA. Max out contributions to your health savings account. Check out education and childcare tax breaks in your state. And lastly, keep record of charitable donations, business expenses, and medical costs. Coming up on Today As It Happened, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky continues meeting with allies amid a push to end Russia's occupation of Ukraine. That'll be right after the break. Welcome back to Today As It Happened, Scripps News end of day snapshot of our biggest stories. So let's pick up where we left off.
Australia is launching the world's first social media ban for children under 16. More than 1 million social media accounts held by users under the age of 16 are set to be totally deactivated tomorrow in that country. The landmark ban affects Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, Facebook, X, Snapchat, and Reddit. Now, supporters say this ban will protect children from addictive platforms and predatory algorithms. But the ban isn't sitting well with some people, including 2 teens who are actually fighting the law in court.
So I'm against this social media ban because as young Australians, we will be completely silenced and cut off from our country and the rest of the world with this ban. Even if all these kids got banned from these platforms and there was no way they could get on it, they're just going to move to a different platform and it's going to be worse. And they're just going to keep jumping to different platforms. So the whole ban doesn't make sense if it's not going to work.
Okay, so the tech companies would be on the hook for enforcing this ban, and they could face fines of up to $32 million for serious or repeated breaches. Meanwhile, more and more people turning to crowdsourcing to meet basic needs. GoFundMe reporting today that it saw a 20% increase in people asking others to help them out with things like rent, utilities, groceries. The for-profit crowdfunding platform says Essentials fundraisers have been rising for the past 3 years. Now, when SNAP was cut off during the shutdown, GoFundMe saw food-related fundraisers up 6-fold. And the latest numbers from the Department of Labor showed job openings remained flat in October. They held steady at 7.7 million. That's a significant drop since job openings peaked at 12.1 million back in March of 2022. Now, today's report also shows layoffs rose to nearly 1.9 million during October. That's the most since January of 2023. Fewer Americans are quitting their jobs, an indication that people have less confidence about the labor market. And a peace deal between Russia and Ukraine remains elusive, especially after Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky reiterated that his country will not cede any land to Russia. That is a big part of Russia's demands. Scripps News international correspondent Will Denslow reports that when President Trump was asked about this, his response was to tell Ukraine to, quote, play ball.
Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky's whistle-stop tour of several European capitals has continued on Tuesday. He is in Italy as part of a effort to ensure that Europe remains united behind Kyiv as efforts continue to find a peace plan with Russia. This is a core tenet of what Donald Trump is trying to achieve in the US administration. Now, we've heard from Donald Trump, who says that Russia currently has the upper hand and that the onus is on President Zelensky to play ball. Ukraine is reportedly working up its own peace proposals, and Zelensky has again reiterated that Ukraine is not prepared to give up any kind of territory as part of a peace plan as it stands. Now, Donald Trump, in an interview with Politico, had some sharp words for European leaders. He said on the issue of Ukraine, they're all talk, very little of substance. He also had a broader criticism, saying that it is a decaying group led by weak people who are weak and led by political correctness. This comes just days after a national security strategy accused Europe of civilizational erasure. In response, we've heard from a spokesperson for the European Commission. They say that they are proud of the leaders here in Europe, both in Brussels and across the EU. William Denslow, Scripps News Group, Brussels.
We have an update about a woman detained by ICE who has ties to a high-profile Trump administration official. We're talking about the mother of the nephew of White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt, and she has now been released from an immigration detention center. The lawyer for Bruna Ferreira is also accusing the Trump administration of lying about this case. So Scripps News investigative correspondent Patrick Terpstra, live with me here in our studio in D.C. You've been making phone calls. What are you learning about this?
I think this was a surprise to a lot of people that she was released. And here's how it all went down. There was an immigration hearing yesterday in Louisiana in which the attorney for Bruna Ferreira said that she should be granted bond, that she's not a danger, she's not a flight risk. And this immigration judge agreed. What's even more surprising about this is that the attorneys for the government said that they agreed with that as well. So she was released from this detention center in Louisiana late last night. She shares an 11-year-old son with the brother of Caroline Leavitt, who is, of course, the White House press secretary. And when she was arrested several weeks ago, the government said she was a, quote, criminal illegal alien, and that she had had an arrest and charge for violence, battery. They never would give details about exactly what it was they were talking about, but the attorney for this woman says that they believe it relates to an incident that happened when she was 16 years old. Essentially, she got in a fight as a teenager in a parking lot of a Dunkin' Donuts, but she was never arrested, she was never charged with anything, and all of that, even if it had happened, would have been a juvenile record. So that never quite made sense to them. They say she came to the United States from Brazil with her family as a 6-year-old and had lived here for a very long time. So they have been questioning what they consider a false narrative coming from the White House and the Department of Homeland Security, not just about her being a criminal, which they say she is not, but they're also questioning why the White House has said that she has not spoken to Caroline Leavitt in years. This is her attorney.
She's regularly been seeing the Levitts for the last decade of her life. So the narrative is frankly false and defamatory, and we don't understand why this has happened to her. She actually respects Caroline Leavitt. She looked up to her achieving her dreams.
There are other parts of the case that he disputes. Last week, the White House told us that that Ferreira had not spoken to her sister or to Caroline Leavitt in years, but not only that, but that she had not been living with this 11-year-old boy for a very long time. That apparently also is something that is in dispute. We've asked the White House to comment about this, Department of Homeland Security. So far, they have not gotten back to us with any sort of reaction. Meanwhile, Maritza, she continues to push for her green card. Important to point out, though, she could be arrested again by ICE at any point, and deportation proceedings could resume. She's just not in custody at this time.
Yeah, we'll be tracking that, and I'm sure hers is one of these cases that will be very high profile if that happens again. All right, thank you to Scripps News investigative correspondent Patrick Terpstra, live with us.
Straight ahead on Today as It Happened.
President Trump is giving himself the highest mark on his handling of the economy. I'm Maura Barrett. Coming up, how Americans are grading him when it comes to the cost of living and what the Federal Reserve's interest rate decision on Wednesday could mean for your wallet.
Welcome back to Today As It Happened. I'm Holly Furfer. Okay, let's jump right back into our rundown of our top stories of the day.
Justice Department confirming through court documents that it intends to prosecute former FBI Director James Comey again. 2 weeks ago, a judge dismissed a previous indictment after a judge set limits on evidence prosecutors can show a grand jury. Well, that limit expires on Friday. Now, prosecutors want that limit lifted, saying not being able to review emails or other electronic communication between Comey and his confidant, Daniel Richman, essentially cripples their mission to re-indict. Now, Comey originally pleaded not guilty to allegations he lied to Congress before that was dropped. The National Weather Service is understaffed headed into the winter season, and right now it's working to hire back hundreds of positions laid off by the Trump administration. But so far, the effort is progressing at a snail's pace. Only about 80 final job offers have been accepted for meteorologists, hydrologists, and other specialized staff. Now, this comes after roughly 550 positions were cut by the Department of Government Efficiency, also known as DOGE, earlier this year. All right, President Trump hitting the road to tout his record on the economy. Scripps News business and technology correspondent Maura Barrett joins me now at the desk. So, Maura, the president has, in recent days, tried to portray a robust economy. The message has kind of been up and down in different media appearances he's had, but many Americans see this very differently. So let's talk about what you're hearing.
Yeah, Maritza, I mean, for most people, it comes down to what they're paying when it comes to rent or groceries, the prices that they're seeing every single day. And we've been talking about it nonstop. Affordability is a top concern for millions of Americans. And the president says that he's helped drive prices down. But as I mentioned, many consumers still say that inflation is a major issue for them.
President Trump giving himself high marks on his handling of the economy.
What grade you would give
A+.
your economy? A+.
Yeah, A++++++.
But polls show most Americans are grading his performance on the economy more harshly.
I would probably give it a C or a D-.
Nevin Bickle says he's seen everyday prices go up.
Every time I go to the grocery store now, you're etching on almost $50, $100 every time you go. So it's become a little frustrating.
He's among the more than 9 in 10 U.S. adults who say inflation is still an issue. And fewer are feeling confident in the president's actions to fight it, with a term low 39% saying they approved of his handling of inflation last month. Now, lawmakers on both sides of the aisle spotlighting affordability.
I think affordability is the issue. That's what trumps everything else.
Employers posted nearly 7.7 million new jobs in October, barely budging from September's figure, according to new federal data out Tuesday. And employers laid off almost 1.9 million workers, the most since January of 2023. But Americans appear to still be spending, with retail sales rising in September and on Black Friday to kick off the start of holiday spending. The Federal Reserve will now take that data into consideration ahead of its Wednesday decision on interest rates. The central bank is expected to cut rates for a third straight time. That could help drive down interest rates on mortgages and credit cards, but some economists say it won't lift all areas of the economy.
We shouldn't look to the Federal Reserve to solve all of our ills or believe that a small shift in interest rates can make a big difference.
Now, another interesting sign of challenging economic times is that more people are actually crowdfunding for their basic needs. According to GoFundMe's year-end report that was just released, 20% more people turned to the site this year just to help cover the cost of housing, groceries, utilities, and other basic needs.
I'm seeing it everywhere too, on like Facebook groups, people asking for help, asking help getting their kids gifts, asking help for their utility bills. We're seeing it everywhere. But Maura, you're here in DC with us because of that Fed meeting happening today and tomorrow. So What do you think we're going to learn from this?
Well, it's the last Fed meeting of the year, and we've been looking forward to it all year, especially because it's been kind of whiplash that we've seen with the past meetings. And so the meeting's underway right now. We'll get the decision tomorrow afternoon, and then the chair, Jerome Powell, will speak immediately after. That's where we're going to hope to learn a bit more about the Fed's thinking, the decision they made, what they're thinking going into next year. But the thing that's making their job harder for this month's meeting is that they're missing a lot of key data because it wasn't surveyed and then wasn't released during the government shutdown. And at the end of the day, the Fed's two main goals are to maximize employment and keep prices stable. It's what we hear time and time again. So I'll be listening for that from Powell tomorrow to listen for the bank's reasoning, as well as whatever they're forecasting for early 2026.
Yeah, and certainly the president has put a lot of pressure on the Fed and specifically Powell to do something about those rates. So we know you'll be watching and report back.
I'll be
Maura
there.
Barrett, thank you so much.
Coming up on Today as It Happened.
I plan to confront Secretary Hegseth on exactly what the hell is going on in the Caribbean. I plan to demand Secretary Hegseth give the total, unedited videos.
You're watching Today as It Happened, Scripps News rundown of the biggest events and stories that happened today. So let's dive right back in.
This week, lawmakers on both sides of the aisle called for the release of this entire video of the double tap strike on that alleged drug boat in the Caribbean. I know some lawmakers were briefed today on some new information. So what's the latest on that effort? What do we know about what lawmakers are saying after that chat today?
Yeah, the so-called Gang of Eight, congressional leadership, along with the chairs and the ranking members, the vice chairs of the intel committees, are meeting now, we believe, with Secretary Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense. The Trump administration styles him the Secretary of War. Additionally, they're also meeting with General Kane, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and Secretary Marco Rubio, longtime U.S. Senator from Florida, now the Secretary of State. That meeting, we understand, is likely underway as we speak. There's a lot of scrutiny on the Trump administration, especially from Democrats, about the circumstances involving that strike and the question of whether the Trump administration will release that full unedited video of the strikes on September 2nd. We now know, and the Pentagon has confirmed to my colleague Haley Bull, that there were in fact 4 strikes total on that ship, which the Trump administration alleges was carrying narco-terrorists and drugs bound for the United States. Again, there's been a lot of questions about the methods that were undertaken by the Department of Defense in trying to down that vessel in the Caribbean, including the question of whether they possibly struck people who were in the water attempting to either signal for help or flip their boat back over to save themselves. The Democrats have maintained a lot of criticism of the Trump administration. Republicans have largely defended the administration, but Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer making clear what his questions will be to the Trump administration officials who are coming here to brief the Gang of Eight.
I plan to confront Secretary Hegseth on exactly what the hell is going on in the Caribbean. I plan to demand Secretary Hegseth give the total, unedited videos of what happened in the September 2nd boat strikes. Trump originally agreed to do this, but now they're afraid. What's Hegseth hiding? And second, I will demand of Rubio and Hegseth what the hell is going on in the Caribbean and in Venezuela. What are their plans? How far do they plan to go?
Clearly some pointed questions probably underway as we speak from the Senate Minority Leader to those Trump administration officials who are here on Capitol Hill. Now, it's worth noting that the Senate Minority Leader making clear that if that video is not released publicly, he will have major punishments for Secretary Hegseth in the upcoming annual National Defense Authorization Act, including slicing the Secretary's transportation budget, his trip budget, by 25%. Again, that could be a huge punishment for the Trump administration if they do not release that full unedited video. A lot of questions about whether that provision will make it into the final package of that must-pass annual defense spending bill. But again, Clearly, Democrats have a lot of criticism of the Trump administration here. There was a Democratic member of the House of Representatives who introduced articles of impeachment against Secretary Hegseth earlier today. Those not expected to go anywhere. But again, a lot of criticism from Democrats, as they have all along, of Secretary Hegseth and the Trump administration's handling of these boat strikes, possibly to increase pressure on Venezuela.
So, Nate, we know there's a Democratic healthcare vote scheduled to happen this week, part of that that negotiation to reopen the federal government after that historically long shutdown. What do we know from Republicans? We know there are a few plans being floated. Anything substantial or substantive that we can talk about tonight?
We do have an update in that department, Marit said. There was this kind of will they, won't they question of whether Republicans would put a plan on the table, and it was just announced by the Senate Majority Leader John Thune that they will be taking a vote on Thursday alongside Democrats' vote on trying to extend these Affordable Care Act subsidies by 3 years without many other substantive changes. The Republicans will vote on a plan championed by Senators Mike Crapo of Idaho and Senator Bill Cassidy, the Republican from Louisiana. Now, this is a Republican largely only plan. Senator Cassidy saying that he believes he does have the support from a majority of his Republican colleagues. But remember, in the U.S. Senate, it's not just a majority. It's 60 votes to pass the vast majority of legislation. Does not seem likely Democrats are anywhat inclined to vote for this plan. But Senator Bill Cassidy telling us he has that support from his colleagues. Take a listen.
Is there any unity in the Republican conference over your proposal?
I think so.
These Obamacare subsidies are set to expire in about 3 weeks. So why not try to hammer out a bipartisan proposal to try to get this solved before the end of the month?
It takes two to tango.
And you just don't feel that Democrats have come to the table?
Would anybody want to dance with me? I'm by myself. And so there's some dances you can do by yourself, but passing a health care bill is not one of them. And so we've got to have them willing to do something different than giving all the money to the insurance plans and leaving the consumer with a policy which has a $6,000 deductible. That does not work for families.
And in the moments after it was announced that this would be the proposal getting a vote on the Senate floor Thursday, the Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer calling this a phony proposal on the part of Republicans. I want to break down for you, Maritza, though, exactly what this proposal would do. It's called the Healthcare Freedom for Patients Act. It's the Republican counterproposal. It much like we've been reporting for weeks now, it's one of the Republican plans that, which appeared to be favored by President Trump at one point, would deposit money directly in Americans' HSA accounts. Now, the eligible individuals would be those who are earning less than 700% of the federal poverty rate. They will get between $1,000 and $1,500 a year directly deposited into their health savings accounts, depending on their age. Here is the kicker, though, and a poison pill for Democrats. Funds in your HSA, though, would not be able to be used for abortion or gender transition services. And additionally, there's no extension as part of this agreement of current Affordable Care Act subsidies, which of course were first passed into law by President Joe Biden in 2021. Ultimately, they expire at the end of this year. Democrats making very clear the fact that this does not extend those subsidies, not even temporarily, means that this is a non-starter for them. Add in those abortion restrictions on spending health care funds along with the gender transition ban. Certainly, this is something that Democrats are not at all likely to support. Feels like we're right back in the starting position. Does not seem like real bipartisan negotiations are underway, at least here on the Senate side, about some sort of off-ramp, some sort of bipartisan way to extend these Affordable Care Act subsidies or lower the cost of health care for millions of Americans. The nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office, Maritza, we've talked a lot about this, has already said that if these Affordable Care Act subsidies expire at the end of the year, which they're expected to, millions of Americans could lose their health insurance over the next decade, some in part due to those higher costs.
Thank you for joining us tonight on Today As It Happened. I'm Holly Furfer. Have an excellent Tuesday night.